Hello and welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and my colleague this week is Sadhbh Lynch. And this time we take a look at the Pensions Adequacy review, which has just been launched. Sadhbh takes us through the impacts of rising inflation, and finally we look at the fines for now pensions.
So, Dave, they've announced the long-awaited pension adequacy review. Do you want to bring us through it?
Yeah, this is breaking news. So this has come out, and so we record these Monday morning. So this has just happened. So we've not had long to look over it. But yeah, it's the long-awaited adequacy review around pensions, being sort of rebranded as a relaunch of the Pensions Commission that was previously convened in 2006, which brought about auto enrolment. So it feels like a continuation of a theme of big picture pensions solutions. Um, it's quite interesting, some of the comments around it. It feels less about increasing contributions across the board and some kind of scaling up of what people are paying in, albeit there's a strong acknowledgement that people retiring in the future will be a lot worse off than people retiring now. And I think the primary reason for that is the demise of defined benefit pensions. And so people aren't going to be getting such levels of guaranteed income, but also people aren't probably saving enough. But that sentence in itself, people aren't saving enough. I mean, what does enough mean? And what does even people mean? Because as the commission goes through, they're talking about certain sectors of the employment market and the general population, particularly women, as being identified as not saving appropriately for various reasons. And that is going to be a big challenge, because some of the issues around pensions saving, because they're so linked to salary, will be based on labour market and equality of salary, but also lifestyle, with people, women generally taking time off to care for children, or these kind of things. So that's going to be an interesting part of the review. They're very concerned about low income earners and what they're doing and how much they're saving, and they're probably not saving enough either. But you kind of reading between the lines, but you're definitely getting the hint that for people who are earning low amounts that probably aren't triggering auto enrolment, and those only just triggering auto enrolment, you do start thinking, if you're long term on that salary, what's the point of having a relatively small pension at the end? Is that really going to change your life? Are there better things we can do? Also, identifying self-employed workers, again, that comes up a lot. The amount of pension saving amongst self-employed is very low, so that's going to be a key part. And also certain ethnicities, so Pakistani, Bangladeshi people are being identified as opting out of auto enrolment, and also not saving enough. And some of this is because of religious and cultural reasons as well. So quite interesting that those areas are pulled out as being key bits. It's basically looking at the sort of the unpensioned, even rather than just the underpensioned people. And at the same time, they've also announced that GAD will do an investigation into the proportion of life in work and in retirement. We know there's a broad rule of thumb that we're having sort of a third of your life, working life, in retirement. And so whether they're going to review what that's going to be like. And there's also, they've announced a review of the state pension age, because again, even though we know that's probably going to go up, it is going up to 68 in a few years. We do need to understand what the future of the state. No, 67. Sorry, that was wrong. 67 in a few years, but we need to understand how and when it will probably go up to 68 and beyond. If you need to have a state pension that's going to be affordable for everybody. So the key lever for that is delaying when it comes into payment. So it's paid for perhaps a shorter period of time. So yeah, big news. So you're going to be reading and hearing a lot about it over the next few weeks. And it's due to report in 2027. So got a bit of a while to get the output of that. So plenty of time for people to talk about and what they think that should happen, and also petition the commission as well with ideas. So yeah, very interesting. It's the big news really they've been waiting for a long time. Okay, so if you're going to give us an update on what's going on from the sort of the economic side of things, we've got a slightly higher than expected inflation, and as you know, no one likes things to be other than as expected. So if you can tell us what that means for DB and DC schemes, please.
Yeah. So, a recent number for inflation, so this is for end of June, came out, and it unexpectedly rose to 3.6%. So that means prices have increased 3.6% versus June last year, driven by quite a few different factors, but it's up since May, and they think it also might increase during autumn too, so kind of a prolonged period of this increased inflation. So inflation can basically have like several knock-on impacts. Obviously, directly, if you're someone who's saving for a DC pension scheme, it's harder to save for retirement because things are more expensive now. So that's kind of like quite an obvious impact. But then also, if you think about it from a DC perspective, if things are increasing in price now and into the future, then it's kind of eroding the value of your savings. So any savings that you currently have in your pension scheme, they're not going to be worth as much if inflation keeps persisting to be higher. So that's definitely an impact for DC schemes. And then for DB schemes, it can complicate investment strategies, specifically around funding levels. So you want to make sure that all of your scheme is hedged against any inflation movement. So definitely a good time to just make sure everything is as expected on the DB side. As when inflation doesn't behave as expected, obviously your investment strategy can not be great. So it's definitely a good time to just reevaluate and make sure that everything's in line with expectation. Then also from a more economicsy standpoint, when inflation's high and then economic growth is low, which is the environment that we're seeing at the moment, it's quite difficult for the Bank of England, so they're who sets the interest rates for the UK, to decide what they need to do. So their primary focus is controlling inflation, so they want that to be closer to 2%. So that would mean they would keep interest rates higher for longer. But then they also have to balance this with the declining economic growth that we're seeing in the UK. So their secondary objective is to make sure that growth is also doing all right. So we might see, specifically with that awesome inflation spike that they think will be coming, delay to these rate cuts. So interest rates might stay higher for longer, which could have an impact on the valuation of schemes' liabilities. So higher interest rate would mean a lower present value of liabilities, but then also on bond yields. So any corporate bonds, government bonds, those yields are going to stay higher for longer if the interest rates do stay higher for longer too. So yeah, I think it's important to make sure that everyone's just considering their inflation hedging, to make sure that member outcomes are definitely protected. And then you also want to make sure that the returns that you're seeing on your investment strategies are keeping up with inflation, just to try and alleviate some of that rise in prices that we're seeing. Also, one other impact that I was thinking about is specifically when there's caps on retirees' payments from pensions. If the cap's below that inflation, then it can also erode some of that value, because obviously the increases aren't keeping up with what we're seeing in the economy. So yeah, definitely overall a challenging time for pensions. Low growth, which is bad for growth assets, obviously not returning as much, but then high inflation, which is eroding the real value of any of those investments. Okay, Dave, so do you want to tell us about the now pensions fines that we've seen?
Yeah, this is quite significant. So the regulator has fined Now Pensions £100,000 due to some failures they had with advising some of their members of some of the statutory communications, especially around auto enrolments. So yeah, not going to go too far into the details, but primarily it covers over a number of years some failings at Now Pensions to communicate members, misaddressed emails, bounce backs from people, but the key bit was the fact that these were statutory notifications that people should have had to advise them about that they've been auto-enrolled and what their options are around that, and that hadn't been sent out. And then to compound that, when that was identified, Now hadn't advised the regulator of those breaches, those significant breaches in sort of the regulator's language. Now Pensions refuted some of that, some of those definitions and interpretation of the legislation, but the regulator took that through their determinations panel, which is like an internal appeals court, who upheld the decision. So yeah, I mean it's notable just because of the size of the fine, and the regulator does go through some reminders for around what the expectations of master trusts are, and that they should be reporting breaches when they happen to the regulator to ensure that members are getting the support they need. So yeah, a rather serious slap on the wrist for Now Pensions, and I'm sure it's something they've rectified going forward. But yeah, but notable the regulator has taken this step and levied such a large fine.
Okay, so thanks everyone for listening. Please join us again next week for the next Pensions in 10.